It was just supposed to be a regular interview. Nothing fancy. No headlines. Just a quiet young man stepping into a brightly lit studio, sitting down on a worn leather chair across from a well-known host, and answering a few simple questions about his famous uncle Jonathan Roumie. But sometimes, history doesn't ask for permission. It just happens. And that night, that moment, it caught fire. You could almost feel it, something electric in the air. The lights were too bright. The silence before the cameras rolled was too loud. And the host had that look, that smug, lean in with a smile look. The kind that says, "We're not just here to talk, we're here to poke." Jonathan Roumie's nephew, 19-year-old Elias, sat still, hands folded in his lap, a little awkward in his oversized denim jacket. He didn't look like someone ready to spark a spiritual storm on national television. He looked like a kid. But what he carried inside him, it was fire. The first few minutes were soft, gentle, almost boring. The host threw him softball questions. What's it like having a famous uncle? Do people recognize you in public now? Ever think about acting yourself? Elias laughed nervously, gave polite answers, spoke quietly. His voice was warm but unsure. You could tell he hadn't done this before. And then the shift came. It was subtle but sharp. The host tilted his head, smirked. Leaning in, he asked the question that changed everything. "So, Elias, Jonathan plays Jesus in The Chosen. Some say that's just acting. Others think he's taken it way too seriously. What do you think? I mean Jesus." "Really?" The audience gave a scattered laugh, a few claps. But Elias didn't smile. He paused, looked down at his hands, and then he did something that nobody expected. He looked straight into the camera, and he spoke, slowly, softly, but with a weight that made the room fall silent. "I know the world laughs at him," he said. "They mock, they joke, even on shows like this. But I've met him." A hush. The host blinked, confused. "You've met Jesus?" Elias nodded. "I don't mean a vision. I mean in my brokenness. In my anxiety. When no one else saw me, he did. I felt him. I still feel him." The camera cut to the host, his smile fading. "I know it sounds crazy," Elias continued, his voice steady. "Now, but Jesus isn't just a story in a book. He's the reason I'm not lost anymore." For a moment, silence, the kind of silence that hurts. Then the host forced a laugh. "Well, I think your uncle would be proud of that performance." But Elias didn't back down. "This isn't performance," he said. "This is truth." The room shifted. The energy changed, and the world began watching. Within hours, clips of the interview exploded online. People weren't just sharing it, they were breaking it down, dissecting every word, every expression, every pause. Some praised Elias as a modern-day prophet. Others mocked him relentlessly. But no one could ignore what he said. Because in just 2 minutes he shook millions awake. And behind the scenes, Jonathan Roumie was watching. He'd been in his trailer, filming season 5 of The Chosen. When his phone began buzzing, text after text, voicemails, mentions. "Your nephew just went viral. Have you seen what Elias said about Jesus? Bro, turn on the TV." Jonathan thought it was a prank. Until he watched it. And when he did, he wept. Because in Elias' voice, in his conviction, in that moment, Jonathan saw something holy, something pure, something that the world desperately needed to hear. But with that moment came something else. A storm. What started as a soft whisper of faith had now become a national debate. Talk shows, late-night hosts, influencers, even politicians, were weighing in. Was Elias Roumie just a kid parroting his uncle's beliefs? Or was this something deeper? And more dangerously, why did so many need him to be wrong? Because real truth doesn't just illuminate. It divides. And Elias was about to find that out. The hard way. The morning after the interview aired, Elias woke up to a sound he wasn't used to. Buzzing, non-stop buzzing. His phone was vibrating like it had a pulse, texts from unknown numbers. Dozens of missed calls. Instagram tags flooding in by the hundreds. He rubbed his eyes. Still groggy, still innocent. He had no idea what was waiting for him outside that bedroom door. His mother stood in the kitchen, phone in one hand, coffee in the other, eyes wide. "Elias," she said, her voice a mix of shock and fear, "you need to see this." She turned the screen to him. CNN.Fox.MSNBC.YouTube. Thumbnails flashing his face. Podcasts, labeling him the preacher kid. Comments like wildfire. Is this kid for real? Brainwashed by religion. Finally, Someone brave enough to speak the truth. Cringe. Holy chills. Jesus freak. And then, a DM request from someone big. Piers, Morgan's team. They wanted him on that night. Then another. Then another. People from every angle. Every ideology. Some wanted to mock him. Some wanted to uplift him. Some just wanted the ratings. And in the middle of it all, Elias just stood there, 19 years old, heart pounding, terrified. He hadn't tried to be famous. He hadn't asked for any of this. He just spoke what was real. But the world doesn't care about real. It cares about viral, and viral is never safe. Later that day, he sat with his uncle Jonathan in a quiet chapel offset, away from the cameras. It was just the two of them. No agents, no noise, no audience, just soft candlelight flickering against wooden pews, the scent of old stone and incense. Sanctuary. Jonathan looked at him, eyes full of something only a man who's seen fame and faith wrestle can understand. You okay? He asked gently. Elias hesitated. I didn't mean to say all that, he whispered. It just came out. Jonathan nodded. Double quotes. Sometimes the spirit speaks before we even know what's happening. But now, people hate me, Elias said. They think I'm crazy. I can't even open TikTok without seeing my face turned into a meme. Jonathan leaned closer. Elias, when you speak truth, you will always stir the crowd. Some will listen. Some will laugh. Some will come after you with pitchforks. But you don't answer to them. He paused. You answer to the one who gave you the courage to speak at all. There was silence between them. Then Jonathan added, but I need you to know something. Speaking truth publicly, it hurts. He looked down at his hands. I've had friends walk away. Castmates avoid me. I've been called a fanatic, a fraud, even a false messiah. But Elias, he looked up again, eyes glistening. If you keep your eyes on him, it's worth every scar. Elias felt a lump in his throat. He wasn't used to being the center of anything. He wasn't strong like his uncle. He wasn't sure he could take it. But he nodded that night. He went back on TV. It wasn't like the first time. Now, the hosts came loaded, smirking, prepared. He sat across from a political panelist on a primetime talk show, one of those high-gloss, high-heat programs that survive on conflict. The host leaned in, sharp as a blade. So Elias, you say Jesus saved you from being lost. That's a loaded statement. Lost how? Drugs, alcohol, porn? Or is this just vague religious fluff? The crowd chuckled. Elias blinked, swallowed, and then quietly he answered, I used to believe I wasn't worth anything, that I was a mistake, that my existence was some kind of cosmic joke. I battled depression. I hated myself. I even thought about ending it. Silence fell. But then, Jesus didn't just give me faith. He gave me hope. He gave me a reason to keep breathing. The host didn't expect that. He shuffled his cards, tried to pivot. But do you realize how dangerous it is to push religion on people who may need therapy or medication? Elias responded, stronger now. I didn't say don't get help. I said I found my healing in Jesus. And if one person hears that and chooses life over death, then I'll take every insult you throw. The studio froze. The host tried to smile. But the audience didn't laugh this time. Because truth, when spoken without shame, slices through noise like a sword. But not everyone appreciated it. Within 24 hours, Elias University released a vague statement distancing itself from his personal religious views. A popular influencer mocked him in a viral TikTok, mimicking his words with cartoonish tears. And worst of all, a fabricated clip began circulating. Doctored, edited. It showed Elias seemingly saying, everyone who doesn't follow Jesus is worthless. He never said that, not even close. But the damage was done. Hashtags began trending. #cancel Elias. #fake faith. #Jesus. GRIFTER. Death threats poured in. People dug into his past. Even his high school teachers were contacted by reporters looking for dirt. Elias stopped sleeping. Stopped eating. He stayed inside for days. And Jonathan, he watched all of it unfold with a helpless ache in his chest. He wanted to protect his nephew, to shield him, to scream back at the world. But he knew something deeper was at play. This wasn't just about media. This was spiritual. The enemy doesn't care about actors. He cares about voices. Voices brave enough to speak the name of Christ in a world that wants him forgotten. Jonathan knew Elias wasn't under attack because of who he was. He was under attack because of whose he was. And the darkness always flinches when light starts to rise. So one night, Jonathan sat down with Elias again. This time, no chapel. Just the back porch. Under stars. You still believe? He asked. Elias nodded, though his eyes were tired. I'm scared, he admitted. But I believe. Jonathan smiled. Then you've already won. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small, worn cross necklace, one he'd carried for years. I wore this when I shot my first. Seen as Jesus, he said. It reminded me who I was serving. He placed it in Elias' hand. Now it's yours. Elias looked at it, fingers trembling. And in that moment, something shifted inside him. Not the fear, not the pain, but the purpose. He realized he hadn't gone viral by accident. He hadn't spoken on impulse. He'd been called. And calls come with cost, but they also come with power. The power to reach millions. The power to awaken hearts. The power to start a fire that wouldn't be put out. It had been 3 weeks since the interview. 3 weeks since Elias Roumie's quiet, trembling voice became the front line of a spiritual battlefield. And now, the stakes were higher than ever. A top-rated live debate, show the kind where careers are made or broken in 10-minute segments, reached out to Elias. They wanted him for a roundtable discussion. For panelists, one moderator. And him. The theme, faith in modern culture, relevance or relic. It sounded respectful, neutral, intellectual. But Jonathan knew better. He called Elias that night. You don't have to go, he said. They're not inviting you for a conversation. They're setting a trap. But Elias paused silent for a long time. And then he spoke softly. I think I'm supposed to. Jonathan knew that tone. He'd used it before. Right before he took on the role of Jesus in The Chosen. That quiet certainty, that trembling courage, that whisper in your soul that says, walk into the fire anyway. So he didn't argue. He just said, then, I'm praying. Every minute you're on that stage, I'm praying. Elias arrived at the studio 2 hours before airtime. He was greeted by bright smiles, fast-talking producers, and polite reassurances. You'll be fine. Just be yourself. But the green room was cold. To clean. Like a surgical theater. The other guests arrived one by one. A famous celebrity psychologist, known for her viral rants on toxic religion. A best-selling atheist author, who once debated Jordan Peterson. A progressive pastor, who preached deconstructed Christianity on TikTok. And a sleek political analyst, who smiled like he already knew the outcome. Elias sat quietly, surrounded by degrees, book deals, and curated brands. He didn't belong here, or so it seemed. When the cameras went live, the host began with charm. Tonight, we explore whether faith still has a place in modern culture. Can ancient beliefs survive the digital age? Should they evolve, even disappear? Each guest gave polished, rehearsed responses. Then it was Elias' turn. He leaned forward, adjusting the mic near his collar, and spoke. I think faith isn't about survival. It's about surrender. The panel blinked. He continued. Faith isn't meant to trend. It's meant to transform. And if you've ever been in a place so dark, so hollow, that you thought your life didn't matter, then maybe you know what I mean when I say Jesus stepped into my mess, and he stayed. The psychologist cut in. That's emotionally manipulative language, Elias. You're romanticizing trauma. People need therapy, not fairy tales. Elias didn't flinch. I've had therapy, he said. It helped, but it didn't save me. Jesus did. The pastor chuckled. Double quotes. Well, my version of Jesus is more about inclusion and less about divine rescue missions. Maybe you've confused the message with the mythology. Elias turned to her calmly. With respect, if your Jesus never offends you, never challenges you, never asks you to change, then maybe he's just a mirror. The room, TENSED. The audience, silent now. The atheist author spoke up next. Let's be honest. Jesus is just another myth recycled from ancient stories. Horus, Mithras, Dionysus, same resurrection theme, different name. Elias didn't debate theology. He didn't cite scripture. He just looked into the camera and told the story. I was 13 the first time I seriously thought about ending my life. I felt invisible, empty, like nothing I did mattered. I'd sit in the shower with the water turned up, just so no one could hear me crying. I didn't think anyone saw me. He paused. But one night, I whispered, if you're real, show me. And I felt something wrap around me. I didn't hear a voice. I didn't see a light. But I knew I wasn't alone anymore. I'd been seen. And the person who saw me loved me. He looked around the room. I don't follow Jesus because I need an imaginary friend. I follow him because I met him. In the moment I was going to die and he gave me life. The host tried to move on, but the audience was frozen. You could hear people breathing. Some were tearing up. Others just stared. And then it happened. The analyst, quiet until now, leaned forward. Elias, that's powerful, he said. But do you understand what you're doing? Elias looked confused. You're young, the analyst continued. The world is listening. People are hanging on your words. You're shaping minds. What happens if 5 years from now, you walk away from this faith? What if you change? What if this all becomes a phase you regret? Elias looked down, a long pause. And then, he smiled. If 5 years from now, I'm not the man I hope to be, that doesn't make this moment any less real. I'm not standing here because I'm perfect. I'm standing here because he is. A ripple through the crowd. The host scrambled to wrap up. Well, we'll let our viewers decide. But one thing's for sure, Elias Roumie has given us a lot to think about tonight. They went to commercial. But the internet. DIDN. Single quotes T. Within minutes. Clips were everywhere. That one line. I'm not standing here because I'm perfect. I'm standing here because he is. It was reposted, requoted, tattooed, turned into posters, even painted on murals by sunrise. People called it the moment that stopped time. Not because it was flashy, not because Elias shouted, but because he didn't. Because he sat in the middle of fire calm, trembling, an honest dot, and he didn't back down. Jonathan watched the live feed from home. Tears rolled silently down his cheeks. It wasn't pride, it was something deeper. He'd seen many actors in his life. He'd seen many performances. But this wasn't acting. This was an anointing. And anointings don't come with applause. They come with impact. By the next day, pastors were quoting Elias in sermons. Teens were sharing his clip in youth groups. Atheists were debating it. Spiritual seekers were DMing him in droves, asking, "Can you tell me more?" But behind the viral blaze, Elias was exhausted. The backlash hadn't disappeared. Death threats, hate mail, even threats of violence at his campus. He received a call from the school board. "For your safety, you may want to consider taking a leave of absence," Elias agreed. But deep inside, he wasn't afraid anymore. He wasn't hiding because, for the first time in his life, he knew who he was, and whose he was. The studio lights dimmed. The applause faded. The firestorm quieted. But the echo of Elias Roumie's words never stopped. Over the next few weeks, the world moved on as it always does. A new controversy took center stage. A new celebrity scandal went viral. The spotlight shifted. But somewhere, in the quiet corners of coffee shops, youth groups, bedrooms lit by phone screens at 2 a.m. people kept watching. That clip, that moment, that line. "I'm not standing here because I'm perfect. I'm standing here because he is." It resonated. Not because Elias was a theologian. Not because he was famous. But because he was real. Raw. Unpolisher. Human. Unwed. That's what made it divine. He didn't try to convert anyone. He didn't argue, attack, or win a debate. He just told the truth. And the truth spoken in love has a way of setting people free. Across the world, thousands began reaching out. A girl in Brazil sent a message. "I was going to kill myself tonight. Then I saw your video." A soldier in Ukraine wrote, "My faith was gone. Now I feel something again." A former atheist in Ireland posted, "I don't know what I believe yet, but I want to know more about this Jesus you love so much." And in churches, from Texas to Tokyo, his name kept coming up. Not as a celebrity, but as a testimony. One voice, one moment, reaching millions. But with that impact came a choice. Elias had disappeared from social media, stopped doing interviews. He'd turned down speaking requests from megachurches. People wondered if he was done. But he wasn't hiding. He was healing. Back home in Los Angeles, he spent his mornings walking the trail behind his neighborhood. No cameras, no crowds, just birds, breeze, and the still, small voice. At night, he would journal. Not for followers. Not for a brand. Just for himself. And for God. One evening, Jonathan came to visit. They sat on the back porch again, same stars overhead. Same hush between them. Jonathan handed Elias a cup of tea, smiled, and said nothing for a while. Then finally, he asked, "Do you regret it?" Elias looked up. "No," he said quietly. "It hurt. It was scary. But no, I don't regret it." Jonathan nodded. "I never told you this, but before I auditioned for The Chosen, I almost backed out. Elias raised an eyebrow. Jonathan chuckled softly. I thought, who am I to play Jesus? I was broke. Unknown. Just another actor in LA. But then I realized he doesn't need perfect. He just needs willing. He looked Elias in the eye. And you were willing. Elias looked down at the necklace Jonathan had given him. It still hung around his neck, tarnished now, but precious. He touched it gently. Uncle John, what if I never go viral again? What if that moment was it? Jonathan smiled. Good. Elias looked confused. Good. Jonathan leaned forward. Because your calling isn't about going viral. It's about being faithful. Whether one person's listening or 1 million. He paused. And you were faithful. Elias nodded slowly. It made sense now. This wasn't about fame. It never had been. It was about obedience. About surrender. About saying yes when everything inside you screams no. Weeks turned into months. Elias enrolled in a Bible college. Quietly no. Press. No public announcement. He began leading a small Bible study at a local youth center. Sometimes there were only 5 kids. Sometimes 2. Once no one showed up. But he kept going. Because ministry isn't measured by crowds. It's measured by love. And one day, one of those kids, 14 years old, lonely, angry, half drunk on pain, came up to Elias after a session. He didn't say much, just looked him in the eye and said, I saw your video, that's why I'm still here, and walked away. Elias stood still, heart full, eyes brimming. That's when he finally understood, the kingdom of God isn't built on stages, it's built on moments. Moments like that, one soul at a time. Meanwhile, Jonathan kept filming The Chosen. But something had changed in him too. He wasn't just portraying Jesus now. He was walking with him deeper than ever before. Because seeing someone you love suffer for the gospel strips away all the noise. It burns off the shallow, and what's left is real faith. In an interview months later, a reporter asked Jonathan, was Elias's moment just a blip? Or do you think it had lasting impact? Jonathan smiled. I think that moment planted seeds all over the world. And seeds don't go viral. They grow slow, quiet, underground, until one day, you look up, and the world's changed. He paused. And that's how the kingdom works. The clip didn't go viral, but it didn't need to. Because the people who heard it, really heard it. Back in LA, Elias kept writing. Books, just prayers. Letters to God, some full of fire, others full of doubt, but all of them honest. And that perhaps was the greatest miracle of all. Not the fame, not the headlines, not the applause, but the honesty. Because when you give the world your polished answers, they forget you. But when you give them your wounds and let Jesus shine through the cracks, they remember. 1 year later, Elias sat in that same interview chair, where it all began. But this time, he wasn't a trembling kid anymore. He was a man, not because he had all the answers, but because he wasn't afraid to say, I don't know. The host asked him, what do you hope people remember from what you said back then? Elias smiled and said, I hope they remember that Jesus sees them. Pause. That he's not a meme, not a myth, not a trend. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And he loves them fully, deeply. Now, the host nodded, and for the first time in that studio, no laughter, no mockery, just reverence. When the show ended, Elias walked out into the night air. Cool still, holy. He looked up at the stars. And whispered, thank you for choosing me. Voiceover slows, soft piano underneath, because sometimes the loudest sermons don't come from pulpits. They come from pain, from humility, from broken voices trembling with truth. Elias Roumie never asked to be a preacher. He never wanted the spotlight. But when the moment came, he answered, and in doing so, he reached millions. Not with charisma, not with fame, but with one simple eternal message. Jesus sees you. Jesus loves you. And he's not done with you yet.